In other news, the European Union foreign ministers are in Brussels today to try to figure out a way to initiate some kind of dialogue between the US and Iran amid rising tensions. Now, the bloc's foreign policy chief says they are focusing on how to avoid a military escalation in the Persian Gulf.
Well, they also believe there is still time to save the 2015 nuclear deal. They're calling on Tehran, having scaled back on some of its nuclear commitments under the deal.
If Iran acquires nuclear weapons, then other countries in the region will acquire nuclear weapons. It becomes a very, very toxic and dangerous situation. So we are looking to find a way to preserve the nuclear deal, which we think is the best way of keeping the Middle East as a whole nuclear weapon free.
And for more, Holly Hudson joins us live from Brussels. Holly, what are some of the key takeaways from today's meeting? And realistically, can EU leaders actually convince Tehran to actually stick to the 2015 nuclear deal, though?
This is a very tricky balancing act. Iran top of the agenda today. The EU desperate to try and preserve, try and save this agreement, which is very close, ministers say, to falling apart. However, the only perhaps tool that they have to do this is with regards to trade, to actually try and protect Iran from some of the very tough sanctions that the US have imposed upon them, to protect, to shelter Iran's businesses. But will that be enough to satisfy Iran? They have said, the foreign minister today, saying they need to do more to try and persuade them to stick to this deal, even so much as signaling that they may actually reinstate their nuclear program if the deal isn't saved. So really a lot at stake and not a lot of time to actually find a solution. British Foreign Secretary and one of the men who are trying to become the next British Prime Minister, Jeremy Hunt, saying that there's only a very small window within which to do this.
Iran wants the EU to do more, or to assure them that they're going to get those economic benefits that were promised under the deal. But, Holly, how can the EU do this without jeopardizing its relations with the US?
Well, yes, exactly. As I said, this is a very tricky balancing act. The situation is, at the moment, very precarious, and this tool, this trading tool, the Instex tool, as it's so called, that the EU are trying to employ, trying to set up to help Iran avoid these sanctions, does risk blowback from the US, of course. It's going to be very tricky to employ in practice to satisfy both Iran and the US with regards to getting around those sanctions. And the US, of course, maintaining a tougher stance against Iran, encouraging the EU to do the same and join what they've described as sort of a maximum pressure campaign on Tehran. The US ambassador to the EU ahead of this meeting today saying that time for reflection is over, time to act is now. We encourage our EU friends to join the US in unequivocally condemning Iran's actions. But the EU want to give diplomacy a chance. They don't see that Iran have necessarily stepped too far over the line yet. They want to see if negotiations can resolve all of this. But as Jeremy Hunt and many other ministers are saying, there's really not a lot of time to do this, and with escalating tensions in the region between the US and Britain as well, there really is not a lot of time, and there's no signs that Trump either is going to back down.